Thanks everybody for coming. And like Jens said, I'm Ben Speakman. I am the developer relations engineer, the first of hopefully many, but right now it's just me. And today I want to talk to you a bit about what we've done with the SDK and how we've tried to make plugin creation easier, hopefully a little less confusing, and the other things that we can hopefully do with it. So there's a few things I want to talk about. One is why even bother having an SDK? What does an SDK mean? Second, we're going to talk about what's in the SDK, how it's interesting. And then I'm going to go over and do a demo creating some plugins for you, running some plugins, showing how it works. After that, we'll leave some time for QA and the inevitable rants. And of course, I'm going to be here the entire length of the camp, and I'll be taking notes on anything you guys want to say. So you run into any problems, I know people already have, find me, talk to me. If I can't fix it, I'll write it down, and I'll get to it at some point. So there we go. Now, one of the Atlassian values is open company, no bullshit. This is the inverse of that value. Sometimes you got to give people some bad news, and I'm hopefully going to come to you today and give you some good news that maybe the worst of it is over. This is a favorite saying of mine that I think goes especially well with the occasion. So, what is development like currently? And by currently I mean before the SDK, before we can do things with it. And there's three basic steps to any kind of development, and this is what we did with the how Atlassian said this is how you handle it with the SDK. Install Maven, no real big deal, right? Create a skeleton project, which is just creating for an archetype, and check your changes as you go. This is similar to the compile, test, debug cycle, which we all go through when we're developing apps. Well, as most of you will probably already know, the problem comes in when you actually try to follow these steps. For example, installing Maven means you have to use our POMs, you have to use our settings XML, and you have to use our central repos because we didn't think it was possible or convenient to set up a million different repositories to serve every dependency of all 7 products. So if you weren't already a Maven expert when you started working on Atlassian plugins, you became one very quickly. That's really not optimal. The second problem is that when you do a skeleton project, creating archetypes is a major pain in the ass. They're impossible to understand. They don't auto-update. They have a lot of problems, most of which we really can't fix because we're crippled by the plugins that come with Maven on this one. And forking them and distributing them to you in a better way was not something that we really were able to judge as possible. So creating a plugin is really hard, much harder than it needs to be. And the third thing is that until very recently with plugins too, we were basically forcing you to restart the entire application every time you wanted to change something. So if you wanted to make a quick change, test it, debug it, then you could only test that one change. Or if you were trying to be clever, you could make a series of changes and say, okay, I'm pretty sure this won't affect everything. And then go ahead and run it again and see if you were right or not. Sometimes you were, sometimes you weren't. But what the problem was, it slowed things down, it made it hard to understand, it basically killed developer velocity. And aside from the fact of being productive with a set of tools, if you can't get things done quickly, if you can't do simple, obvious things, and if the things that you think should be automated are not automated, you're going to hate the tool and you're not going to work with it. I wonder how many people who have tried to write Atlassian plugins have been scared off by how difficult it's been. And I think it goes to the credit of those of us here who have struggled through and written pretty awesome plugins for Atlassian stuff have had to go. So I'd like to think that we can do something better than that. So the SDK contains a number of different things which are trying to solve these problems that come up over and over again in development. We want you to understand, first of all, that Maven is our problem, not yours. We want to keep it from becoming an influence in your development process. We spend day after day fighting with it at work. We try to protect you from that as much as possible. The second is the SDK is to help you get new plugins up and running quickly. And once you have those new plugins, it's designed to help you debug them, to integrate, test them, to run them in different containers, to do a bunch of other things that plugin developers need to do. Now, when I say this, I don't mean that we're going to throw existing plugin developers to the winds of fortune. There are ways to convert existing plugins to the new SDK that aren't that bad. And the process has been exhaustively documented on CAC, most of the pages that I wrote. So if you have a problem with converting your plugins, again, comment on the page. If you have edit permission on CAC, I know some of you do, please do something to let me know if you have a problem. I want the days of people having problems with plugin development and yelling alone in the dark room to be over. So what do we need specifically from the SDK? And I've talked a little bit about this already. Well, first of all, we have 7 products and we have 7 different ways of using those products. Some products start with a shell script. Some are Tomcat enabled. Some have standalone versions. Some have war versions. It's generally a pain to get things installed in a manageable way if you're dealing with, especially if you're dealing with more than one product. So one thing the SDK absolutely must do is give us a uniform interface across all products, because you just want the thing to start. You don't care how it starts. The second thing is, like I was saying earlier, we must make plugin creation easy. I don't mean easier, I mean easy. It has to be brain dead. It has to be just one script. Again, we want to make it as easy as possible to iterate over your product, to iterate changes, to develop rapidly, especially when we're talking about things like gadgets, where most of the problem is that you want to develop with JavaScript quickly anyway. You shouldn't have to, mess around with things that aren't related to reloading the browser or saving the file. Those things we want to fix as well. And finally, like I said, Atlassian has a pretty complicated and pretty zany Maven structure. It's not something that you guys need to worry about. It's something that we need to worry about. And in the past, it's been very, very hard to isolate things that are particular to our Maven configuration from yours, especially if you want to inherit from our archetypes to do something with plugins. Let's say you have a multi-module plugin, or you're inheriting from your company's POMs, and then we tell you to inherit from ours, and you have to merge your settings XML and our settings XML, and it just ends in tears. So we really want that kind of thing to stop. The little annoyances to stop plugins from being fun. So what exactly do you get in the SDK? First of all, we give you a Maven. And it's basically just a stock Maven 2.10, but it's been specially configured to look at a settings XML that we provide. It's more or less the same one you get if you download it from the old DevNet. And it sets up all the proxies for you. It comes with the Sun jars that normally we're not allowed to distribute, but we are because we're exploiting a loophole license for this. But the idea is to have the Maven all in one place, and you don't even have to use it if you don't want to. Yes, it is there, and yes, you can customize it, and later Don will go into great detail about how to do funny things with it. But in general, it's not something that you want to worry about unless you absolutely have to. Second is that we've made several product plugins for Maven. What this means is that we now have a Maven Jira plugin, a Maven Confluence plugin, a Maven Crowd plugin, Fisheye Crucible, Bamboo, so forth. The idea is that these Maven plugins provide the common interface we're looking for. All these plugins take goals like run, create, debug, integration, test. The outside interface is uniform. The inside is a complete mess, but that's okay because that's where it belongs, inside where no one has to see it. Next, we have new plugin archetypes. We've gone through the old ones. We've taken out a lot of the older cruft. We've put in newer ones that use the newer products, so they're automatically tied to Jira 4, Confluence 302, et cetera, et cetera. They no longer work by inheritance. So when you use the archetype to create a new plugin from the SDK, you're not going to have, Jira plugin base, Confluence plugin base, and be dragging in 5 or 6 other things from the dependency tree. It'll just be a flat POM. And instead, you will incorporate dependencies into your own POM and bring in what you need. So you'll depend explicitly on a version of Confluence. You'll have complete control of the artifacts that you need, and you won't have to worry anymore if the archetype goes out of date because, well, there isn't any archetype to inherit from. And the last ingredient is that running Maven directly is kind of a pain. And again, it gets back into the problem of you need to be a Maven expert. Well, you don't need to be a Maven expert to write a plugin, and we want to make sure that you don't need to be. So we've created some shell scripts that you can run from any system. We've got versions for Windows, for Linux, and for Mac. They all work in the same way. Basically, you type Atlas and then dash and the name of the command you want to run, and that's it. So advantages to doing this, aside from the obvious stuff like isolating the Maven problems, you get some powers to the command line that are provided with the plugins. For example, say you have a plugin and you want to run it in Confluence 3 because you're developing it in Confluence 3. But then again, you want to try it against Confluence 2.10 just to see if it'll work at all, and if it does work, what the problems are with it. This required a fair bit of gymnastics before. Now it's as simple as passing a parameter to the command line on Atlas run. Similarly, you can do the same thing with containers. So you're developing your plugin on, let's say, Tomcat, and most of us are, but you're going to deploy on WebSphere or Resin or some godforsaken proprietary thing that no one else uses except your company. And I've worked in places where that kind of stuff happens. Well, now you can teach Cargo, which is the Maven, which is a system for launching different J2EE containers. You can teach the Maven Cargo plugin how to run your specific container if we don't cover it. And you can launch your plugin in your container with no configuration required other than typing Atlas run. So this alone, I think, is going to save you a lot of time in testing, doing integration, and doing a bunch of other stuff you need to worry about. So this is more or less the end of my slides, but the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move over to a demonstration. On my system here, I have a completely clean user account, which does not have Maven installed, which has nothing but Java installed. And I have the SDK installed in there, and I have some sample plugins ready to go. And I have a little demo script here to show you exactly what I'm going to do. So bear with me 1 minute while I switch over to that other account. Hopefully we won't have any display issues like we were having a minute ago. There we go. Okay, this is another account on my laptop. It's more or less the default Ubuntu account. To prove to you that I'm not lying, we'll go into the Maven directory. There you go. There's a repository there, but there is no settings XML there. This is the place where Maven will store all the dependencies that it downloads, but that's the SDK's problem, not yours. If you have your own version of Maven, if you have a later version, earlier version that you're stuck to for some reason, use your own settings. It's okay. It will not break anything. You're free to do what you want. Here's the SDK. This is pretty obvious, I think. Apache Maven is where Maven lives. The bin directory is where the scripts live. And the repository is, as I said earlier, those special Sun jars that people are not generally allowed to distribute. Because the SDK is a software package, which is a very vague definition that we decided we fit into, we can distribute the Sun jars under there, which means there's no more of this, cannot find javax dot whatever, please install manually. It's all there for you, and it all already works. You don't have to do anything. So let's start first by, I will show you, actually I can probably make this a little easier to read. There. So first of all, I'm going to show you how to create a Jira plugin using the SDK. You ready? Watch this. If I can type. There you go. There'll be a short way. All Maven does its thing. I've already run the commands previously to prime the repository, so it's not downloading a bunch of stuff. But what's happening here is that the script is executing the internal archetype. It's going to ask you for the Maven group ID, which will just say, and test Jira plugin. Why not? 1.0 fine, package sure. There you go. Plugin done. There you go. That's how easy it is. One script. Can you guys see from the bottom there? No, you can't? Okay. How about now? This is kind of important, so I want to make sure you guys see this. There we go. Okay.
Can you get a little bit higher still?
Maybe. I cannot move it up any higher on my screen. I can make the font bigger. Yeah, I'm sorry I can't make it much better than that. I really suck at setting up presentations. But anyway, that's how you create a Jira plugin. It's one script. I don't know how it could be much simpler. You could even script it yourself if you want to. The create script takes parameters for group ID and artifact ID if you really care about that much. So step 2 of this, oh, sorry. I should probably do one more thing. This is Atlas Run. This is a script that starts Jira and installs your plugin for you. So what's happening is that the SDK is figuring out what product you're using. It'll decide what set of rules you need to install the plugin in that particular product. And then it's going to go through all this stuff. I know most of you probably seen Maven before, but so right here it's generating the OSGI plugins 2 bundle for you. It's going to copy over the dependencies that this specific version of Jira needs, and then it's going to put them into the proper bundle plugins directory. Then it starts Jira. Here's the Jira startup messages. This is all happening inside Cargo. I haven't set any of this up. Cargo handles all this for us. And initialize the plugin system. It's thrilling stuff, I know. One thing that you are seeing here is you're seeing a lot more noise on startup than you normally would. We've configured the logs to spit out a lot more information than they usually do when Jira starts. The reason being that if you've done something still in your plug initialization, or if your plugin needs to do something at Jira startup that it doesn't do properly, you'll be able to see the log messages here. So at this point, it claims Jira is up and running. We will see. There you go. We will quickly log in, and I will show you on the administration panel here the installed plugins, and I will prove to you that the plugin we just created in 5 seconds is actually in Jira ready to go. So scroll on the bottom here. And there you go. That's it. That's how easy it is.
We couldn't see that.
Huh? Couldn't see this what? Sorry. Well, okay. Well, that's the plugin I did just create from Archetype. If you don't believe me, come by later and I'll show you at a much slower pace. So anyway, we're done with that one. So that's how we do Jira. Over here, I've already taken the liberty of creating a Confluence plugin for us with the same archetype with the Atlas Confluence create plugin script. What I'm going to do here, though, is show you how you run a different container. So what I've done here is I've asked, by default, the plugins will start in Tomcat 6.0. What I've done here is ask Cargo to bring up Tomcat 5.5 for me instead. And there'll be another short pause while this carries on doing different things. I'm letting the pauses go here while Maven does its thing because this is the pain that a lot of you have been feeling and that a lot of us have been feeling because every time we do something, we have to wait half a minute for things to start working. You don't have to do this anymore, and in a few minutes I'm going to show you exactly why you don't have to do this and how you can get around doing this. It does create some nice dead time, though. Happy Windows 7 release day, everybody. This is the party. I don't know if you heard. We're getting down right now. Okay, server's up now. If for Cargo to hear it, it says Confluence is up. I'll go a little slower this time, hopefully. So these port numbers I'm typing here are conventions that we use. So of course, you can override them. You can also specify the server, the base URL, whatever else you need to. But these are just the defaults that people can know to get up and running as quickly as possible. So it claims Confluence is running, and there it is. We can log in. And under the administration section, under the plugins, if we go down to the bottom here, we should see right here, testconf plugin, which is the name of the plugin I created earlier. And there you go. So, and now, let's try to do this a little bit faster. This plugin here, which I'm now showing you, is the Jira Gadget tutorial. I wrote this plugin about 6 weeks ago to give people an idea of how to start with writing new gadgets from scratch. It's a very simple gadget that doesn't really do anything other than display a quick little message, but it gives you a starting point where you don't have to understand everything about gadgets to start writing one. I give you a template so you can go from there. So while I'm talking, so Atlas run one more time. This will be the last time, I promise. And what's happening here is that it's going to bring up Tomcat 6 running Jira 4. And it's going to take the plugin that I've already prepared. It's going to install. The tutorial plugins are tied to the written tutorials that are now on confluence.atlassian.com. They're being continuously integrated by Bamboo, so we'll know if something breaks. And you can access them right now if you want. This isn't, private or pre-release code. This is stuff that's been out and working for 6 weeks now. So I think that's important to point out. Don, your plugin system is sure slow sometimes. Okay. Do, 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 do. These aren't my jokes. I'm sorry. I'm much better at writing jokes beforehand than I am about improving, which is why I was such a disaster when I tried to take theater in high school. Okay, so now that Jira is back up, we'll go back there. And there's a few preliminary steps that we're going to have to do. Because we're talking about a gadget, we need a dashboard to put the gadget on. And we don't. And when Jira comes out of the box like this, it doesn't have one. So I'm going to show you how we can get around that. And no, we don't need to remember the password. So under Tools up here, this is where you create new dashboards in Jira 4. We'll go ahead and create one. And sure, test dashboard. And we'll start with it blank, and we'll make sure everyone can see it. So here's a dashboard. Places for gadgets, place markers. I'll go to Add a New Gadget. And this is the gadget browser, which is where you can add new gadgets from. And I've already taken the time to configure it so that my gadget shows up here. So the test Jira tutorial gadget is the one that is provided by the source code. I will add it now. Then I am finished. And that's the tutorial gadget. It just says hello. Big deal, right? So here's where we can get a little more clever with it. The SDK also provides Don's Maven CLI plugin. What this is a command line interface to Maven. It basically brings up the Maven shell and reactor and then accepts commands from it. So you can do things inside of Maven without waiting the 4 or 5 seconds for Maven to start up every time. This is something that we've been using for a while internally, and it significantly speeds up plugin development. There are 2 commands that the SDK defines by default. One is to install a plugin, one is to remove a plugin. So if we go ahead and install a plugin, that's pretty simple, just PI. So this is doing nothing but installing the same plugin. See? Execution time just under 2 seconds. That's not bad, right? If we go to the dashboard and reload it, you will see the gadget is still there. The gadget is being provided with the plugin that we've written. The message is still there. The gadget is still there. Everything still works. So now I will do another little trick. I will go into the source of the gadget. If I can remember how to use my system. Resources, and then gadget.xml. Oops, whatever. This is basically what a gadget looks like, and I know it's not terribly important what we're doing right now, but this is what I want you to see. This is the big, bold header message at the top of the gadget. I'm going to change it. I'm going to save the file. Now that I've changed the plugin, I'm installing the plugin. Done. I refresh Jira. Done. That change took about 5 seconds. I think that beats the pants off of 3 minutes. Okay. So far the demo's gone swimmingly, which means that something else is going to break terribly. We have one more thing to show you, and this is actually pretty cool. I'm going to turn on a variable in my environment. It's called Maven_color. I don't know how many of you guys have heard. We sell this product called Clover. It's pretty damn cool, actually, and it's something that doesn't get enough credit. I'm going to give a little bit of credit now. The SDK comes with something called Atlas Clover, and this is exactly what you think it is. It runs Clover on your plugin for you. No licensing, no setup, no Maven nonsense, just this. Maven Color plugin does a couple cool things, which you'll see in a minute. So basically it's getting Clover, which instruments your bytecode, which does all your tricking. Look, the color changed in the console. How about that? Warning messages are a different color now. Clover's running, creating the reports. Here's the results. Clover found 6 methods. Half of them were tested, 27 statements, no branches. Green means it's covered by a test. Red means it's not covered by a test. There you go. That's awesome, people. And with that, we have come to the end of our demo. I'm sure there are lots of questions at this point. How much time do I have, Jens?
5 minutes.
5 minutes? That's great. Questions?
So the CLI just attached to the existing running?
That's right. The question was the CLI does it attach to the existing instance. Yeah, there's configuration involved, but again, the SDK has the magic inside it. So all you need to do is say Atlas CLI. It'll figure out what's running. It'll figure out what port to connect on. It'll just connect up. And those predefined commands are always there. You can't really turn them off. They're hard-coded. So also, if you're more interested, Don CLI plugin has a pretty active community around it. There are ways to extend it to add further commands. So if you need to do other Maven tricks, maybe specific to your environment, you can add those to your plugin and use them to CLI the instant they're in there. There's no more configuration necessary.
The CLI was a different shell than the Atlas run, right?
Yes. The basic idea is you start the program in one window, and then you switch to another one, then you run CLI. You can interact with the running program. No more stopping, restarting. That's what it buys you.
You can use the SDK also to plug in version 1 stuff as well, or not really?
With reservations. Part of what Plugins 2 bought us, the question was, can you use it for Plugins 1 plugins as well? Part of what Plugins 2 bought us was the ability to install plugins into the running product. Previously in Jira 3.13 and before, you had to put things in webinflib and restart the entirety of Jira. Because that hasn't really changed, you can't use most of the fancy tricks of CLI and run with Jira, like for example, auto-updating plugins like I've just shown you and expect it to work. That's only for Jira 4 and above. Currently, the SDK will generally work only with Jira 4 and above. However, we are going to make it work a little bit better with 3.13. But again, because of the problems with the earlier plugin system, there's not much we can do for that. So think of it as a reason to use Jira 4, I guess.
As a follow-up to that question, can you use it with Confluence 2.10?
Yes, because Confluence 10 does have the Plugins 2 system in it, and it does in fact work with Confluence 2.10. Yeah.
And that plugins 2 is all OSGI powered? Is that the reason?
Yeah, it's all OSGI on the cover, so that we've gone to some links to try to hide the OSGI complexity from you. If you just use basic Atlassian plugin.xml, you'll be fine. However, if you want to, you can dip into Spring Dynamic modules and write OSGI configuration yourself if that's what you really want. And there have been times when we're working on things that we do actually need to use it, so it is handy to have it there. Yeah.
So when you're firing up Jira from here, or Confluence or whatever, how's the licensing? Is it have like a built-in license?
That's a great question. The question was, when you start Jira from here, how does it handle licensing? Along with Plugins 2, Jira 4 comes with another version of our internal licensing software. One of the advantages of that is when you start Jira, it will come up with a 5-user license that is valid for 3 hours after Jira starts, which means you'll be able to do whatever you want to Jira for the scope of your testing, and you'll have a 3-hour window to run any kind of integration test you want with anything enabled. Well, it's less important now that Jira 4 is user-priced and not edition-based. But you'll be able to do anything you want, and that's true of all the products. You have basically a license that you can use inside the SDK. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to go download anything. You don't have to pay for anything. It's just there. Like someone can develop a plugin without even needing to own the product at all if they wanted to. Anything else? What, back there? That's true. You may have noted the most advanced program I used here was VI. There's no, like, you can do IDE stuff if you want to. The SDK, basically, there's instructions on CAC if you want to know the exact details, but the basic idea is you tell your IDE to use the installation of Maven, which is inside the SDK, use this settings XML, and the IDEA or Eclipse can go from there. You can also create Eclipse projects or IDEA projects using the associated Maven plugins directly from the SDK if you prefer to go that route, and they both work. So it's up to you. One more question, thing? We can do one more. Go ahead.
You mentioned at the beginning that you can use any version of Maven that you want. That is going to remain true and include the settings of XML and all that. Is that is 210 the most recent one that you can use? Like
Okay, so the question is, what version of Maven can you use? The idea at the beginning was not to dictate that we always use the newest Maven, but that we have a Maven that suits our purposes, and we want to make sure that that one works without conflicting with a Maven you may have. So for example, the SDK, as you've seen, is Maven 2.10. We use that one because it's what we require to deploy to our internal repositories. And it's also because the SDK has release ability in it too, for people to release their plugins to our repositories. We require that it's 2.10. That doesn't mean that you can't use 2.2.0 or 2.2.1 or whatever on your own. We just want to keep them separate. The second part of the question was, well, what about Atlassian? Are we going to keep it up to date with future versions of Maven and settings XML? And the answer is, of course. I personally am responsible for updating the SDK at this point in time. So if we need a new version of Maven, it becomes clear we need a new plugin or we need a new bug fix or something like that, I'll put it in the SDK. If the repository URLs change, as they sometimes do, we can change that in settings XML and then say to people, just go download the new version of the SDK and don't worry about anything else. And that should be it. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Tim is coming for plugin testing. And then Don is going to show you how to use the Maven plugins themselves.